Happy August everyone, and we start off a brand new month with one of Earth's most magnificent creatures, the elephant. World Elephant Day is in August and it's all about raising awareness for the threats these wonderful mammals are facing. Habitat loss, poaching and of course the conflict with humans. These are all threatening elephant populations. Over the last century, about 90% of African elephants and about 50% of Asian elephants have been wiped out. Elephants are not just awesome, they are very much a part of our ecosystem. Give them due respect. Welcome to Kaleidoscope, where we are positive, daring, different. Ahead on the show, we are with Alex Ryder's Maker today, discussing the problems of SOEs and celebrate Asia's first woman architects, 88 acres. Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe, follow and like us for more. A massive thank you to our partners on the show, Srilanka Life, CDB and The Daily Morning. You are wonderful.
CDB Hybrid Leasing. Enjoy exclusive interest rate and much more for hybrids, plug-in hybrids and EV vehicles.
Looking back at the week that was, this is CDB Snapshot. Some positivity to start. Sri Lanka's budget deficit is down by 64%, 367 billion rupees for the first 5 months of this year. Sri Lanka collects record revenue of about 400 billion rupees in May this year. June's apparel earnings in Sri Lanka are up by 4% year on year to $417 million after 2 months of decline. The Colombo port has been nominated as the world's best growing port in the first quarter of 2024. Inside Out 2 becomes the highest grossing animated film of all time, raking in $1.46 billion globally. Singapore reclaims bragging rights as having the world's most powerful passport this year.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.
Welcome to Srilanka Life News Capsule. It is no secret that Sri Lanka's state-owned enterprises are in trouble. In fact, we've covered this topic on Kaleidoscope very extensively. The government of Sri Lanka set up an SOE restructuring unit under the Ministry of Finance, and in March last year, the SRU was ordered to divest an identified set of SOEs. The biggest loss makers right now are Sri Lankan Airlines, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and the Ceylon Electricity Board. But with elections coming up, is this the right time for privatization? Research fellow at Verite Research Dr. Malathy Knight broke down the issue in detail. With elections in the offing, is this the right time for SOE privatization?
A short answer to that is no, and my reasoning is based on timing. With elections come increased uncertainty and heightened risk perceptions. So this depresses asset prices because investors look to high premiums. So we will not get value for money. So this is my contention. Now, in spite of this, if the policymakers want to go for privatization, then there are two conditions that need to be met. First is that competition must precede privatization. That is essential sequencing, and that was the reason, the main reason behind the success of the SLT privatization back in 1997. The second thing is that there must be transparent and independent accounting to ensure that the realized present value from privatization will be greater, larger than the long-term value under state ownership. So those two conditions at least must be satisfied if we are thinking of going for privatization before election.
Right, so even though there are elections in the offing, what can be put in place to make sure that SOE privatization process will eventually happen?
There's a lot of misperception around this, and SOE reform is seen as equal to privatization. But SOE reforms is way more than that. I mean, we talk about losses, we need to dig beneath the surface and ask why. And the answer, the elephant in the room, is corporate governance. Now, the IMF GDA and the IMF reports have recognized this. And there were two commitments. One was up to 2022 to have the 52 key SOEs annual reports published, and the other one was to publish audited financial statements. Now, both of those haven't been met. Then on top of that, the GDA had as a primary recommendation the setting up of a holding company. That is also not in place, and the SOE law that we've been talking about, and we need that to give effect to the other reforms. So that's all about corporate governance. We have a lot to do before we get to privatization.
Is privatization the only answer to our problem? Are there no other options?
Definitely privatization is not the only answer. And that's seen all over the world. I mean, basically we have to look at what type, it's unique, case by case, what type of entity are we looking at, what kind of market, is it a natural monopoly, is it a competitive market, is it an essential service? We need to look at all of that. And even now, if we look at CEB and CPC reforms, those are not about privatization. It's about competition and unbundling and regulation and tariff setting. Like I mentioned before, corporate governance is very important. I mean, for something like that, listing on the Colombo Stock Exchange is very, very good because you're forcing disclosure requirements and moving towards better corporate governance.
Now, let's take a look at our markets this week. At the Colombo Stock Exchange, the all-share price index continued its downward movement, with lack of investor interest leading to the average daily turnover dropping below 1 billion rupees. Oil prices continued to dip below $80 per barrel, driven lower by disappointing global demand, as Chinese imports in July are set to hit the lowest level in 2 years. Gold prices continue to remain at all-time record highs, above $2,400 per ounce, as investors remained optimistic that the US Federal Reserve would lower interest rates in September. Have you ever wanted your pet to have the luxury of flying? With Barcare, dogs fly first and get head-to-toe pampering, as they should. He's what you call a polymath, a novelist, TV and film writer, playwright and a journalist. He's the author of the world-famous Alex Rider TV series, and this has become hugely successful the world over. He also wrote 2 new Sherlock Holmes novels. All in all, he has penned over 50 books. On top of his literary prowess, Anthony also created some of UK's most beloved TV series, Midsomer Murders, and he's a contemporary legend, and I caught up with him at the Galle Literary Festival for a quick tete-a-tete. Welcome to Sri Lanka, Anthony. Now, you've written books for children and for adults. Are there different processes for each?
I think there are more similarities and differences. I'm very interested in story, in pace, in surprise, adventure, escape, and generally just the act of storytelling is what matters. And in many respects, writing for children and writing for adults is very, very similar. There's a difference only in the language that I use. Obviously, some of the subjects that I might touch upon, which are not really considered suitable for children, I'll avoid. But the actual essence of the storytelling is the same.
So tell me about Alex Rider. Where did he come from? How did he evolve? And what was your idea?
My light bulb moment happened when I was watching With a View to Kill, which is Roger Moore's last James Bond film, and saw how terribly old he had become. And I thought, why does he have to be sort of 57 years old, which is how old Roger Moore was? Why can't he be a teenager? Why not a teenage spy? And this was just after J.K. Rowling had created the Harry Potter books, and the world of children's literature was very receptive to new ideas. But I couldn't do what I was doing before, which was magicians and stuff like that, too similar to Harry Potter. So I said, fine, teenage spy, that's where I'll go, and Alex Rider was born.
How have you sustained that excitement, that interest in Alex Rider? Through maybe double generations, really?
Well, Alex Rider is a classic piece of sort of hero storytelling, and all I have to do to keep the books fresh is to keep an eye on modern technology. So the most recent one, Nightshade Revenge, is all about augmented reality, which is a fascinating technology coming our way soon. Can you imagine you and me talking to each other with a third guest who's in America, but to the viewer is seen sitting between us? That's coming very soon. So I'm fascinated by the world's developments and technology and all the things that are happening, which I put into the books, but the template of the books is just the classic adventure story, which has been around forever and I think will never go away.
What What is fundamental in birthing a character, then sustaining it, and then knowing when to kill him off or put him to bed?
Well, first of all, I would never kill off Alex Rider because I have a feeling and a belief that it is the job of the writer for young people to always be optimistic and to leave them with an upbeat and a positive view of the world to come, because after all, it is young people who may save us from ourselves. We have to rely upon them and we have to encourage them not to give up hope. But I think there is an interesting point in your question, which is when does a writer like me know when to stop? Alex Rider, the more I wrote about him, the more I discovered about him, and the more I enjoyed writing about him. Even in the most recent book, there were new things to bring to the character. But that said, you know, there's another generation of writers coming up, new characters, new ideas. Maybe quite soon it is my turn to sort of stop and do other things. My adult books, for example.
Do you feel that people don't read anymore? There's always been this premise that, okay, books are just going out of fashion. There's much more stuff.
They've been saying that ever since I wrote my first book. Books are dying, books are over, books are finished. I think it is true to say that the world and the perceptions of the world and the way we react to things has changed radically, largely because of social media, which has cut everything down to the machine that you are holding in your hands, even at this moment, to X, to Twitter, to Facebook, to TikTok, to very, very short form. And I think it is also true that concentration has shortened. It is much harder to keep young people involved in a very long book. But that said, storytelling, fiction, books, libraries, I don't think they will ever completely go. We need them as human beings. They sustain us. They give us our energy and our imagination. They give us affinity between each other. I can't imagine life without them.
What is the most fulfilling part of your work?
The most fulfilling part of writing books, it's coming to places like Gore and meeting the people who read them. That's the honest truth of it. The literary festival, we had 5 years with no literary festivals internationally because of COVID, and I felt it dreadfully. I felt very, very isolated and alone. To come here, to meet the people who gather in this beautiful city simply to talk about books, to meet writers, to come to sessions, it reinvents, it reawakens my faith in humanity and in the decency of people all over the world.
What is your most favorite part of your writing journey?
Having the ideas. When I have an idea and a thought falls into my head, I sometimes think, where on earth has that come from? I'm not a clever person, I don't think. I think I like my books, but the ideas for them, it's like sometimes being a wireless, a transmitter, and this signal comes from somewhere, and an idea happens, and you think, yeah, that's a fantastic story, and that moment to me is always the most exciting part.
What's next?
Well, I'm working with Jill on a series which we're going to shoot in Gran Canaria later this year. It's called 9 Bodies in a Mexican Morgue, and it's an original murder mystery that I created, which she is making. And then I'm writing at the moment another book in the series that began with Magpie Murders, Moonflower Murders. The book is called Marble Hall Murders, and when I finish writing the book, maybe we'll adapt that too. I don't know.
Lovely to have had you here, and I just hope Alex Rider transposes himself here.
He hasn't been here yet. He should come. You're quite right.
He should come. Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Not too long ago, the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art showcased a rare and unique exhibition called 88 Acres, paying homage to South Asia's first woman architect, Minnette de Silva. Minnette was a pioneer in the development of modern regionalism in architecture, championing the inclusion of Sri Lankan indigenous architectural practices, local materials, and traditional artistic elements in her design. A prolific architect in her time and one of the first female architects to establish her own practice, the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art Sri Lanka explored one of Minnette de Silva's pioneering works, the Vatapolua housing scheme in Kandy, which heralded a new form of social housing in Sri Lanka, which was considered way ahead of its time. 88 Acres delved into this sprawling hillside development with affordable accommodation for a diverse ethno-religious community of public servants in Sri Lanka. As much as she was an architect, as a student, Minnette was an activist, a writer, architectural editor of the Marg magazine, and later a teacher of architectural history at the University of Hong Kong. Much of her work is chronicled in her autobiography, The Life and Work of an Asian Woman Architect, Volume 1. So here's to a prosperous August and good times ahead. We will see you next week.